Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Hi, friend, and welcome to the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Esther Littlefield, and today, Holly Kane, my co-host, is going to be kicking us off and leading our conversation. So, I'm so excited, Holly.
I hope it works out.
Well, I mean, if not, I don't know what to say.
Well, if not, they probably won't be hearing this.
That's true. It's going to work out. It's great.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I'm going to start off with some questions. So I'm wondering if you have ever felt like you can't take a break from work, or if you feel like if you left work, the whole place would stop functioning altogether. Or perhaps work would continue on the day-to-day, but the larger goals would just absolutely never get accomplished. Do you have high turnover in your volunteers or employees? Do you think that do you feel like you have to train people over and over again? And you get this feeling that like no one is actually thinking about what they're doing or why they're doing it. Do you have a hard time meeting your metrics or feeling successful? Or do only one or two people kind of pull their weight? And so there's a lot of reasons for these sorts of things to be happening. I mean, there are entire podcasts created to talk about these issues. So I'm certainly not going to claim to be able to solve these things all in this one podcast episodes. But I do think that all of these things are a symptom of what I want to talk about today. So we are actually going to be talking about leading solo. So leading solo is when you as a leader shoulder the responsibilities of the whole team on yourself. You are the top performer. You have all the ideas. You create and sustain all the processes, and you set the pace. And others often can't keep up with you. They don't do things as well. So you just do their job and you do your own as well. And I'm wondering, Esther, if you've ever done this, or if you've ever experienced a leader that does this.
Oh boy, Holly, I don't like this question.
You can just say yes and leave it at that.
That's true. But when do we ever do that?
No, never.
So I would say yes. I definitely have seen this happen, and I have probably been one of the people that has done this. And I will say that one of the things that I have fallen victim to is that mindset of thinking that if I don't do it, it's not going to get done.
Not going to get done.
Or it's not going to get done as well as I want it done.
Yep.
And so that is not a great way to lead people.
Yeah.
It's not a good mindset to have as a leader. So yeah, it's definitely a problem. And
it's
I think a lot of...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, you also called out like people that are top performers and people that are, just really driven, which a lot of our listeners are. And so I think a lot of people that have that kind of driven, high capacity, lots of ideas, lots of motivation, they tend to be ones who end up leading solo. But in the long run, that's really not a good plan.
No. We're going to talk about that in a second, but I know I've said this in my own head and out loud. If you want something done right, you got to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Guilty as charged.
Yes. And sometimes I've said it with a kind of a nasty attitude.
Yeah.
This is just the confessional for today. So But we know that that way of leading can have some really bad consequences. So I want to talk about what happens when you do everything yourself. And you may not even realize that you're doing this. So I want you to kind of think about maybe these things that are happening, these consequences. And if you fall into any of these categories, you may be leading solo. So, very first thing, super obvious, burnout, right? We can't do everything on our own. There are reasons that we have teams, and when you have a bunch of people just standing around and you're working yourself to the bone, it's not going to last. It's not going to go very well. You can't sustain that for very long.
Yeah.
So burnout is definitely something that you would experience.
Yeah. I want to say something about the phrase leading solo, just so
Yeah.
that people, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I
Yeah.
think for the context of this conversation, we are not saying that you are like a solopreneur or that you are
No.
literally like the only person leading a
Yeah.
ministry. This is, you are in an environment where there are other people on the team, but you still feel like you are leading
Yeah.
solo, right?
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
okay. Just
I'm
wanted
glad
to.
that you clarified that because it's absolutely, we're not, when you are a solopreneur, these things might happen to you.
Yes.
because
Yeah.
you
Yeah. It's
truly
like,
are by yourself.
right.
But when you have a team around you, you should not be leading solo. You should be having people underneath you. But we're going to talk about that. So another sort of consequence that happens when you are doing everything yourself is that things fall apart when you leave. I mean, that's literally one of the questions I ask. So if you have a team that's not self-sustaining, then you may be leading solo. Another thing is that you actually show your team a lack of trust. People know that you don't trust them if you're constantly doing everything yourself, or you're taking jobs away from them, or you're going behind them and doing it again, or you maybe even undermining what they do. It really shows a lack of trust. Um, you actually don't end up developing others. So people who are on your team when you are sort of operating in this mode, they don't actually grow. They don't get any better skills. They don't get mentored. They stay stagnant, and you wonder why people aren't growing. You wonder why people aren't changing and getting better. And it's could be because you are doing everything yourself. You are leading solo. Um, you really, when you're in this state, you are oftentimes a victim of your ego. And you end up thinking that you are the only person who can do this right. And sometimes that actually comes from a fear of others outperforming you. You're threatened by the fact that maybe you won't be the star of the show anymore, and other people might have better skills than you. So you would rather just hold on to all of the responsibilities, hold on to all of the different things that the team actually does as a function, because you want to be the shining star and you'd rather not anyone else be able to do those things. So when you're in this mode, when you're in this state, you actually can't adapt or change quickly because you're the one that's responsible for all the variables. And this, I think, is a lie that we tell ourselves, that we can actually adapt and change more quickly when we're the ones who are handling it all. And that's absolutely not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, another thing that happens is that you move toward your vision much more slowly. You're never going to get there in the speed or pace with which you could get there if you had a full team that was functioning completely. And then the last thing is that your weaknesses are amplified. One of the great things about having a team is that you have other members that have strengths in your weakness areas. But what you actually end up doing is creating either little duplications of yourself that have the same weaknesses, or you just absolutely, I don't know how to say it, but like your weaknesses are just that much more on display because you're the only one that's handling all of the different things. And I hate to tell you, but you're not good at everything.
Holly, stop ruining our day.
I know. So, do you have any thoughts on this? Is there anything else you can think of? What happens when you're kind of in this mode where you feel like you're the only one that's doing things and you're the only one that can do things?
I mean, I think one point that you made earlier is like, this is also like signs that you might be leading solo. So I think
Yes.
that's the other way to look at it, is that
Yeah.
if you're noticing any of this is true,
Yeah.
that could be a sign that you've been trying to lead solo. But the only thing that I think of that's not really on here
Mm.
is just how it impacts the external. So whether it's
Yeah.
your customers on the outside, or if this is in a church context, like this is the stuff that's happening internally, but how does that impact the external?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's going to have a negative impact
Yeah.
externally too.
Yeah.
Customers are going to have a bad experience, or you're always going to feel like you have to be on, like you're never going to take a day off because you feel like you have to be on 24/7, because if somebody needs to, deal with an issue at the church, like you got to be the one to do it. Or if someone wants to buy your product, like you don't trust someone else to handle that call. You're putting yourself in those shoes of, I've got to have this, I've got to take care of this all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the things to kind of be thinking about as we're talking about this is, are you, I want you to think about your internal dialogue. Are you saying these things to yourself? Like, oh, I really don't want to give that to them because they're going to do that really well and they're going to be better at it than me. Or, I don't really trust that they can do this. Like, they really don't think about the things that they're supposed to be thinking about. There's no way that that person could get that done. I mean, these are really mindset things that are in our head that could be creating a situation where we are leading solo, where we are performing for the team when you actually have a team. So I want to talk about why this happens. If you're doing everything yourself, you may have gotten you may not have gotten your team to buy into the mission. And I want to say before I go further that this situation is not necessarily like mean-spirited or like that someone is, the end all be all. They may not really have seen good examples of leaders doing this well and may not really understand how to lead. And have really understood leadership to be, well, I do everything. When in
Yeah.
fact, that's actually not the case in leadership at all. So I want to put that caveat in there that someone who is leading like this, whether it's you or someone else, they may not necessarily be doing it out of a place of mean-spiritedness or,
Or just trying to keep control. Like it's not
exactly.
necessarily always about like, oh, I have to keep control. It could be that they just haven't learned
Right.
the steps they need to
Right.
get other people.
Right.
Yeah.
So the cause of that is that you may not have gotten your team to buy into your mission. And often it's because you haven't really established your mission, or or it's possible that you haven't communicated it effectively to your team. So they don't know why the work is being done, how the work is being done, where they're going. They're not going to be invested in it. So they don't really know the mission. We actually talked about this, and I know you probably have an example of this, Esther, but we at a hospital that I worked at, we had this little tagline that said act like an owner. And so the only way that you can really act like an owner is if you know the mission, why you're actually there. So have you had workplaces that have had either little slogans or something like that that encourages you to embody the mission?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, right now where I'm at Ramsey, one of our core values is self-employed mentality. And
Yeah.
it's that same idea where it's you are treating it as if it was your own company.
Mhm.
And so in order to do that, like we have to be in alignment with the mission. We have to be
Yeah.
willing to know what those important things are that we're working on and we're doing,
Yeah.
in order to be self-employed. Like anyone who's self-employed definitely,
Yeah.
is clear about what they're trying to accomplish. And so Yeah, I love
Right.
that because it gives everybody a sense of like what I'm doing here matters and I'm part of this bigger thing, and it's not just I'm clocking in and clocking out.
Right. I sort of one of the examples that was drilled into us at that hospital was, that act like an owner. An owner, when they're walking down the hall, if they see a piece of trash on the ground, is going to pick it up and throw it away because they're an
Right.
owner and how the business looks is important to them. But if you're an employee and your job is not janitorial, you're probably just going to be like, oh, well, that's not my job to pick up trash, so I'm just not going to do it, which really is what we're talking about, embodying the mission and really understanding, um, or really acting like an owner, acting like a self-employed person. So, all right. So the whole idea around what I want to talk about today is mission. And we've talked about mission, vision, values, so we're not going to belabor this. But Esther, do you want to help us figure out what mission is?
Yeah. So, most companies, most businesses, most churches will have a mission statement.
Mhm.
And your mission statement is basically a statement of your purpose. It's what you do and who you do it for. And we've learned a lot about mission and mission statements from our friend Natalie Gingrich,
Yeah.
and also through the work we've both done through our experiences in the business world, in the ministry space, and all of that. But having a clear mission is essential to not leading solo or trying to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
If you want to know more about mission, vision, values, we'll put a link to another podcast from our friend Natalie about that. If you want to dive deeper into like really drilling down into mission statement.
Yeah. So, a mission statement gives action and purpose to your vision statement. The mission gives legs to the vision. The vision is the destination, and the mission is how we're going to get there, and maybe even who we're going to bring along, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and so, it's really important to be able to um, have. We talked about having, or we will talk about having a sort of vivid vision, but when you get to the mission, it needs to be really actionable. And so the problems that we talked about earlier could actually be happening because your team doesn't understand or embody the mission. And we're going to talk about how to help your team embody the mission. But I want to give one other little thought before we go further into this, because I want you to be thinking about it from a perspective where you could actually be doing this in where you lead, because not all of us are leaders are the tip top leaders, right, of an organization. We lead within an organization. So if you lead within a bigger organization, I want to encourage you to help create a mission for your specific team or department that leads into the bigger organizational missions. Sometimes when companies write missions, um, they do they are able to sort of trickle down to the singular person within their work, but oftentimes it's a little bit hard to connect to the mission and what you're doing every single day. So if you have specific goals or KPIs or metrics that your team or your department or your piece of the organization is supposed to hit, these actually need to be part of the mission. And one thing that I want to sort of say is that I think that it needs to be um, speakable in sound bites, right? Like we need to be
Mm,
able, you need to be able to walk up to anybody at any point in time and say, like, hey, what's our mission? And whether it's actually like rote memorization or whether they can just convey the idea, I think it needs to be in a smaller soundbite and it needs to be attached to your specific department goals or KPIs or metrics.
mhm.
Um, so Esther, have you dealt with this? Do you have any experience with sort of the departmental mission, if you will?
Yeah. So I, work at Ramsey Solutions, which is a very large company here in Tennessee. But I'm part of the Entree Leadership team. And so Entree Leadership is essentially a business within a business. Like Ramsey Solutions, they really provide hope to people and primarily in the financial space. And they serve people through providing, financial principles to help them be able to get out of debt and all of that. But Entree Leadership is really more about helping business owners. And so we have our own mission statement within Entree Leadership.
Mm.
And, we are speaking specifically to people that are business owners and that are trying to, to build their business, et cetera. And so I think it's really important. And like you said, like to connect it to the work that you do on a day-to-day basis. If we didn't have that separate mission statement for Entree Leadership, it
Mm.
would feel a little disjointed, like some of the
Yeah.
work we're doing, even though it definitely relates to the overall mission of Ramsey, it's still not all directly connected to that mission. And so having that mission within a mission, I think is really important. And I even think of like, what I believe you've done in the past where, maybe a church has a mission statement, but I know for you, you've taught about like for women's ministry, like you can actually have a mission statement
Yeah.
for your ministry that is specific to that ministry, but it still must connect to the overarching mission
Yeah.
of the church or the organization.
Yeah. I think it's really important to be able to connect the individual role, the individual person to the mission. And sometimes you need that sort of interconnected link, if you will, to yourself and your role, your department, and then the overall organization. So I would definitely encourage you, if you are in that sort of space, to think about whether or not you have a mission in your department and if you can create one. So I want to talk about how we can help others embody the mission. So these are people that you are leading. This is your team. And these are different ideas, tips, thoughts that I had that would help us do this. And really, the idea is to embody the mission so that you don't have to lead solo. So that you are not the end all be all, that, for example, the entree department is not all Esther, right? Like we need people to be embodying the mission and fulfilling their specific goals and their specific roles in a really meaningful way so that each person is not an island into themselves. So I want to talk about some different tips and ideas on how to help others embody the mission. So, the first one is to share the vision and then craft the mission together. This is actually going to work better on smaller teams. If you have a really big team, this may not work. But the idea is that vision is really created from a leadership point of view. So that's like your C-suite, or, I know we're talking specifically business here, but in the case of a church, that would be your pastors, your elder board, your deacons, what have you. So it's that sort of higher level of leadership that's going to craft your vision. They're really going to tell you the destination. But each individual department or, the organization of itself can then go from there to craft the mission. And so that's really what I was kind of talking about. But this is not something that necessarily has to be created by leadership alone. This can be something that's done as a team to create the mission. And there's lots of different frameworks and templates that you can use to actually do this. But if you have, and if it's feasible, because when the group gets kind of big, it's harder to do this.
Yeah.
But if you have the right size group, this could actually work really well. If your group is too big, maybe you could subdivide and, create representatives, if you will, to create, I think probably this wouldn't work. Esther, you tell me, I would say probably 20 people is almost too much
I think
to create a mission. Like 10, 12 might even be too many. Right?
Yeah.
What do you think is a good number to be able to create a mission together?
So it's so funny that we're talking about this because it's actually something we have content on with Entree Leadership. And like to your point, the way we talk about it there is that if you are an owner of a business and you have a leadership team, they would say like, take your leadership team and work on that together.
Yeah.
But where we might be talking about a situation, maybe it's a ministry, maybe it's a church, maybe it's a smaller business. I would probably say like 5 to 8 people is a good number in general.
Yeah.
But what I think is super important is in that conversation that everybody understands what a mission is
Yeah. Yeah.
and like the purpose of it, because that's where it can get really messy if you have people with lots of different definitions
Mhm.
of mission.
Yeah.
Um, it can get really messy, and I do think that it helps if the key leader or owner or main person in charge has like a pretty solid
Yeah.
start or like a general direction. And then the
Exactly.
group and team is kind of coming together to really flesh it out.
Yeah. I think that as we sort of say, like, obviously this works better in smaller teams, but the idea here is really to just create a connection
Yeah.
to a mission. And oftentimes when you are able to involve the team, that
Yeah.
creates a connection. So
Yeah.
that's really the goal here, is to create a connection to it. But you have to figure out if this makes sense for the size of your team and
Yeah.
whatnot. But all right. So the next thing really just leads right into this: find ways to connect people to the mission. So if it is crafting it together, or potentially having each person craft their own mission based on the mission that's given to them, have a discussion about what that mission actually means. But basically, they need to fully understand how they fit, how they contribute, and why or how they're needed, why they're valuable. So they need to have a personal connection to this mission, whether or not it's like, we make widgets and your job is to buy the metal that we make the
Yeah.
widget with, right? Like, and so like if you're buying crappy metal, then our widget's gonna be terrible, right? So
Yeah.
you have a very valuable part of this whole widget making team, right? So I know that's a silly example, but
Yeah.
that's just something that I think is super important. So Esther, I think
Mhm.
you have an example of this.
I do. Tell me what was
Is
the
it is it
example.
widgets? You don't remember it, do you?
No, I don't remember my
You didn't
example.
tell me.
What was my example? I said I had an
I don't
example
know.
of this. Oh gosh. Okay,
Yeah,
hold
you
on.
did.
Uh
That's okay.
wow, I already forgot what
That's okay.
I'm
We're
sorry. Hold on. I really don't remember what that example was.
okay.
So I
Connecting
apologize,
people to the mission.
but I can talk about
Do you have
something on the next
thoughts?
point.
Okay. You just tell me you just go ahead and tell the next point.
Okay. The
Okay.
next point is to talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
So we want people to buy into your mission statement. You need to talk about it to the point where you're sick of talking about it. And this is again something that leaders and owners and ministry people just tend to think like, oh, I posted the mission statement and we talked about it at our last leadership retreat and we're good. But no, we need to be repeating it. We need to be emphasizing it. And what I think I've seen done well in some situations, and I've seen this in the church space, I've also seen this in the world, in the workplace, is actually telling a customer story that emphasizes uh the importance of the mission statement. So when
Yeah.
you can like have a story from somebody that exemplifies the team living out the mission statement, it
Yeah.
brings it to life and it gets people really excited. And so you're actually talking about the mission, but you're doing it in a different way. Then
Mhm.
you're not just like repeating a statement over and over, but you're bringing it to life. So I think that's one of the things to keep in mind when you're talking about it, is
Yeah.
to find ways to make it real to people that what this mission is actually matters and the
Yeah.
work that they are doing actually matters.
Yeah. Um, I really like that. I think that when I was doing small group leadership and doing like next steps at our church in Florida, it was really important to me that each of the people within the team really understood that, our job was really to help people make connections, and people are going to stay longer if they have personal connections, and they're not going to get a personal connection most often from sitting in a sermon, right? They make connections when they come to next steps, when they get into a group, when they do that. And so it was our job to actually help make those connections. And so that was really our mission, in small groups and in next steps was to help people make connections. Now, that's not necessarily what the mission of the church was, right? But that
Right.
it helps people live out the mission of the church by making connections and getting them plugged in. So, all right, the next one is make it quantifiable. And when we do this, we're going to track progress and celebrate success. So we want numbers attached to this so that we can actually see where we're at, see where we're going, what's working, what's not working. It's really important to make it quantifiable. One of the things I want to say when we talk about making things quantifiable, because I could jump down the hole of KPIs and metrics all day long, because that's my jam. But I think we need to make it meaningful. And what I mean by that, and this example is going to be super rudimentary, but if we make another $100,000, we can hire 2 employees for $50,000. And what would it be like for you in your position if you had 2 more team members to help you with this, right? So what can we do to make that extra $100,000? Because I said to the team, oh, we need to make an extra $100,000 and just left it at that. Technically, that's quantifiable. I could track the progress. I could celebrate success, say, hey, we made 50 of the 100. Great. Congratulations.
Right.
But what does that actually mean? And what does it mean to them? Now, understandable that there may not be such a direct connection, and it may be harder to find. It may be harder to make meaningful. But one of the things that, I really tried to do when I was working with my clients was making their numbers meaningful. And so when you talk about goals and you talk about metrics and you talk about measuring success, the numbers have to mean something to people, and they have to be put in ways that are understandable and digestible. So if we just say, hey, like our profit margin last quarter was 7%. Well, like, okay, great. Like, I don't care. Like, as an individual employee, I don't care because I don't know. But when I say to an employee, like, hey, you actually get a profit share. You get, we take 1% of profit and we give it to, like, we divide it up between the employees. Okay, well, that 7% of what we actually made now means something to me.
Yeah.
Now actually has an effect on my day-to-day life. And I'm not saying you have to do that, but it's just different ways to make things meaningful.
Yeah.
Or, hey, like we give 1% of our profits to a local charity that you're very connected with. And like, that means 5 more dogs are going to be picked up off the street because we, support the local animal shelter, that sort of thing. So I think it's important to make it meaningful, that where people can connect to the numbers that are related to your mission. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Okay,
So important.
Good. All right. So the next thing is to check in, to take the temperature with the group. I think it's really important as we are moving along, whether you have one specific project goal or whether, this is you just kind of making specific check-in points throughout time. I think it's really important to check in with the team, see if they understand where things are at. Do they have a setback? Do they need encouragement? Are they riding high and then because of an accomplishment, but they're kind of losing, they're so excited about the accomplishment that they're forgetting that there's still work to do. Like where are they in this mission and in the progress on the mission? I think it's really important to take a temperature. And sometimes it's important to adjust the mission or the pacing based on what's going on. I mean, if you have a major hit to your mission or to your goals, we can't necessarily expect people to move at the same pace if they're still recovering. I mean, this was like a total thing that everyone had to do in 2020, right? Like, can our mission even still happen?
Yeah, right.
Has it been obliterated? What's everyone doing? Can people even work, right? So
yeah,
it's important to often check in with people to see how they're doing and to make sure that they're connected. Like, how are they feeling? Do they, it's a great idea to ask, like, do you know how you actually support the mission here? Do you understand it? So it's important to check in with people. All right. The next thing is to talk about change well and to talk about it often. and be adaptable and be positive. So that's a lot in one sentence, but
Mm,
pretty much what I'm saying is um, business moves quick. Oftentimes ministry is pushing forward all the time. And so we need to be able to change well and change often, be adaptable. And so oftentimes the idea of a mission is kind of, okay, we're going to get into this rhythm, we're going to get into this groove, and we're going to just keep going.
mhm.
But when we don't talk about change, we don't talk about adaptation, and we're not positive about it, it can be really hard for people to move quickly and to adapt and to still be able to stay on track with the mission when things do happen. So as soon as you know about change that you're allowed to talk about, it's important to talk about it. It's important to keep your team nimble and to keep them always headed in the same direction. But sometimes the mode is going to change.
Yeah.
Sometimes the tactics are going to change. Like, we still want to do this, but maybe we might be doing it this way this time instead of another way. And we don't want to get our team too bogged down by those things. So it's really important to talk about change in a positive light,
Right.
even if sometimes it's not always positive, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
Yeah.
roadblocks or whatnot. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the key there is like the mission really doesn't change, but the
yes,
method might change and the
exactly.
tactics might change, and that is something that is very easy for people to get off track with, where
Yeah,
they start to conflate the mission with the method.
right.
And they
Yeah.
think that, oh, we have to keep doing XYZ because that's what we've always
Mhm.
done,
Yeah.
but that's not actually the mission. And so we have to point people back to, here's the mission. This is
Mhm.
what we're aiming for. This is what we're doing. And then the how of what we're doing might change. We might make tweaks based on what's happening in the
Yeah.
world around us and what's working, what's not working.
Yeah. So the next one really underscores this, and it's kind of similar, but handle mistakes and setbacks well. So your team members are not going to do everything right all the time, and they're going to make mistakes, and you as a team are going to have setbacks. And that setback could be because somebody made an error, made a mistake, or had a failure. And so when you are handling mistakes, it's super important to do that well, so that as the team is watching you, they understand that, you know, if they make a mistake, you're not going to chop their head off. You're not going to, immediately fire them or get rid of them or, demote them or that sort of thing. Like, handling mistakes well, I think, keeps people connected to the mission, because we are handling people like humans, not like robots or people that are, or machines that are just there to do the job. These are real people who are going to make mistakes and who are going to screw up sometimes, just like we all do. So I think handling it well is important. I can be kind of an emotive person. And so, like, when I look at those things happen, I'm like, well, I kind of don't care about the mission because you just yelled at Sally for not, for replying all, right? Like, like, let's handle it better, because you have the power to disconnect people from the mission. Like, I'm not going to pick up that piece of paper in the hallway because I have bigger fish to fry. My manager's down my neck, right? Like,
Mm,
it's so much more important for me to, like, get them off my back than it is to act like an owner and do the little things. You free people's minds up to actually be able um to do those little things when we don't harp or hurt, I guess maybe is the best way to
mm-hmm,
say it, when
mm-hmm.
people actually make a mistake, because it's going to happen.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
it's true.
All right. So praise people who get it and encourage those who don't. So when someone on the team really embodies the mission, they make a decision on their own that, really, um, is for the betterment of the mission, like, praise those people, but don't forget to encourage the people that aren't there too. Don't forget, to give those people flowers, if you will, for the
Mm-hmm.
things that they are doing. There are going to be some people who are just going to work really well at their job description, and that's it. they're going to give their 100% there. They're not going to go above and beyond necessarily. But I think it's important to encourage people in that. Like, don't forget those people who are just really like, they're a cog and they are really like cogging it out in the bigger machine, right? So, the next thing, we only have a couple more, is trust people. I think one of the big reasons people leave solo or end up doing these things on their own is because they don't trust anybody. And I think if you kind of come to that conversation with the idea that people will fail, some people are going to do things differently. They're going to complete the work differently than you would. If you already have those kind of things in your mind, it's easier to trust people and it's easier to give them the ability to fail. You need to let people have the opportunity to actually fail, and give them safe places to do it.
Yeah.
And when I say fail, I don't mean like major catastrophic fails, but like if someone writes an email slightly different than what you would think, that's not necessarily a fail. Or, like give people trust in small things and let them earn to the bigger things. Right. And I think that when we don't trust people, it really creates that burnout. It creates that idea of, I have to do this because I can't trust anyone else to do it. What was the saying I said earlier? How does it go?
Oh, if I can't do it, if I don't do it,
if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. There we go.
Right. Wow. We were struggling on that one.
That shows a lack of trust in people. So
yeah.
Anyway. Okay. The next one is look for people with your weaknesses as their strength and tell them why they matter. So I think this is really important in just creating a team, right? But when we are sort of creating a team that would be best suited for this mission, we're looking for people who have strengths where we don't. When I talked about when you're leading and when you're leading alone, one of the things I said was that it amplifies your own weaknesses. And so we need to be able to trust people to use their strengths in the areas that we have weakness. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know about what the last one is, because I think you would be a good one to tell us this.
Okay. So last thing to try and, help others embody the mission is to have you become less of the implementer and more of the person doing the guiding or coaching.
Yeah.
And this really plays into what you were just saying about trusting people. Like, in order for people to really get behind the mission, they need to be given some trust and given some ownership in what's happening, which means you have to loosen your grip on what's happening.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is honestly one of the ones that I have a struggle with, because I tend to be someone who wants things done a certain way. I have a lot of, like, hey, this is the right way to do things. This is the way we've shown. This is what works. And when you start to turn that over to other people and you start to do more guiding and coaching, there are going to be mistakes. There is going to be more bumps along the way. But ultimately, in the end, it's going to be better because people will have more buy-in on the stuff that they have actually both succeeded and failed at. Like if you let someone fail and they feel the pain of that, they're going to actually be more bought into the overall mission, because they're going to realize, oh, what I do really does matter. Like the thing that I messed up on actually had kind of a negative impact. We're going to be okay, but I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to grow from that. And so as you guide and coach people more, it's a lot of asking questions. It's a lot of providing, direction without doing it for someone. And I think that really will help people to be more excited about what you're doing and more excited about contributing their own unique perspective and their own unique way of bringing their gifts to light.
Yeah. I really like that one. I think that it kind of leads to, when you are the implementer, right? Like you're much more likely to be burnt out. You're much more likely to kind of spiral, if you will. And so this guide coach role is just so much more of a healthy leadership perspective and model than just doing everything yourself. So I wanted to kind of talk about an example of all of this. It kind of came to my mind while I was doing this and really kind of summed everything up about how not to lead solo. So the idea came to me of a conductor of a symphony. So when you look at a symphony, you see this whole sea of people, but you have the conductor right there at the center. And when you think about it, right, a conductor cannot run around and play all the instruments at the same time, right? You may be able to run to the flute section and play the flute part or the drum section and do that, but it's not going to be happening at the same time. He actually needs each person in the seat that they are uniquely qualified for. And the conductor is actually more of the guide or the coach. And his job is to set the pace and keep people on track. He may actually have the skill to play each instrument, but he cannot play a symphony by himself. And thinking about the physical position of the conductor as well, he's looking at the musicians, not the audience. And he's looking to make sure everyone's with him. He's keenly aware of where each section is going and what each section needs to be doing. And this is really the role of a leader who's helping their team embody the mission. And so if you kind of think about the music as the mission, right? Like each person in each seat is playing a part to that kind of melds together into this one greater mission. And the conductor is not the one who's actually playing. Like no music actually comes out of the conductor. He is actually, did you see that little thing? Sorry.
It happened again. Wait. Okay, guys, you can't see this, but on Zoom, oh my goodness.
That's so weird. Okay.
On Zoom, now there's this thing where if you give a thumbs up, it like actually makes a thumbs up icon go across your screen. And then Holly
over my head.
Holly had a bubble over her head. So we get a little sidetracked there.
Ooh, I'm sorry. I was talking with my hands and Zoom must have thought that it was a thumbs up.
Zoom was like, give me a thumbs up. Oh my word.
Okay. Thank you, Zoom. I was trying to make a point. All right. Well, did that make sense?
Yes,
I think I was kind of at the end of that.
The symphony and the conductor analogy.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those things like when you were saying that and when you were kind of wrapping up near the end here of like what to do, I was thinking about the idea that if you are leading solo in a team, then you're not actually a leader. You're not you're not being a good leader by trying to do it all yourself. And so really what you just shared was what you should be aiming for. You should be working yourself out of a job. And I know we've had other people say that, and there's probably a good famous, like probably John Maxwell said that at some point, like basically leadership is working yourself out of a job because you gradually want to be lessening the actual things you're doing and giving other people more empowerment to be doing those things on their own. And as you do that, you develop more leaders, you build more people that can lead other people. And so that's I just love that analogy of the symphony and how that works.
Yeah, I think it just kind of encapsulates this whole idea of the fact that, I think what I was actually saying was that the conductor doesn't actually make the music, right? So like when we talk about leading solo or having a solo, that person is making music. One person is playing, right?
Yeah.
And that's really not the place that a leader is supposed to be. The leader is that guide, that coach, that conductor that really helps other people embody the mission, but really fulfill their own purposes, right? Like if you think of, the flute player is going to be the absolute best flute player that the flute player can be, right? That person cannot be a saxophone player, right? Like they are uniquely created and uniquely skilled for that seat and that role. And if you as the conductor are running around trying to play all the other instruments, you are in no way helping that flute player to do her best job or his best job being a flute player. So Yeah, I think that for me kind of encapsulated this whole idea of leading not leading solo and helping people sort of embody and fulfill their purposes. And yeah, it kind of all comes down to the idea of working yourself out of a job and
Hmm.
really highlighting others and um making an environment where they can be as successful as they can be.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Hmm. I love it.
good.
Awesome. Thanks,
Did we
Holly.
do it?
We did it. We shared
We
our
shared.
episode about how to stop leading solo. So we hope that this has been really helpful. I know it's been helpful for me to think about. And we're going to wrap up with our
Yeah.
fun question
Okay.
of the day.
Did you think
So,
about this?
yes,
Do you
I
feel
have
good
thought about
about
it.
your answer?
I think so.
Okay. You want to go first or you want me to go first?
I'll ask it this time.
Okay.
I don't know in the order of which we are recording this,
Okay.
when these episodes are going to go out, but whatever. I'll ask
Doesn't
it.
matter.
So, which TV sitcom character do you most identify with?
Okay. Mine is a little embarrassing if you watch the show. We're going to say that my TV sitcom character is is a exaggerated version of me. That's what we're going to say. But I so relate to Katie from American Housewife. She is the mom in American Housewife, and she is just hysterical, number one. And she just, the stuff that she says to her kids and the stuff that she does, like, is so something I would do. Like, when we watch it, my son is like, "Oh, mom, that's you." And Zach, my husband Zach, is like, "Oh yeah, you would totally say that or totally do that." She does go to an extreme, and that's why it makes the show funny, obviously.
Okay.
And some of the things she says and does, I would not do, but it's really about like the spirit of it, right? Like,
Okay.
yeah. So have you ever watched that show?
I have not watched this show,
Oh,
so I am
you
going to
need to
have
go
to
watch
check
a
it
couple
out.
episodes just to see if
Okay.
you think I'm right. So,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. What is
It sounds great.
yours?
Okay, so, I'm going to have to go with Leslie Knope from
Yep.
Parks and Rec.
Yep.
I often
Totally
say that
you.
Leslie is my spirit animal. Um, I just love her character, and I would say, likewise,
Yeah.
a bit of an exaggerated version of me. I'm not quite as extreme as she is on just about everything. One thing that I'm very different than her is I am not a great gift giver. I do not do like the
Oh,
crazy extreme gifts for every
she is.
holiday to every
Yeah.
friend that ever existed.
Yeah.
That's different. But like the idea of her, just her passion about things and her
Hmm.
drive and her like, I love her binders. And
Oh, yeah.
when I started my job at Ramsey, like, and I was just getting like all these papers from everywhere and all this stuff I had to learn and keep track of.
You
And
created
I
a
put
binder?
together a binder. And one of my coworkers saw it. He was like, "What is that?" I was like, "It's my binder of all my things that I need to keep track of." And he was
I think it's just
totally making
it's
fun of
my
me.
binder, period. Like,
I said, I got a Leslie Nope it, I really need to keep track of everything. So
oh my gosh.
yeah, I would say Leslie
Yeah.
Nope. It's mine. So
She is like a huge shining example of determination. And when I think about people in my life, like that's totally you. Like
yeah.
just like
Oh,
unrelenting determination. Whereas I'm like, oh, that didn't work. All right, let's not do that.
I think my favorite moment, one of my favorite moments of the
Mhm.
show, and the one that I relate to on a deep level is when she is outside talking to Ben and they're having some argument, and he's basically like, kind of like, you need to be chill, like you need to chill out. And
Yeah.
she's like, "What? I'm super chill all the time." And like she's basically freaking out while saying, "I'm super chill all the time." And I was just like, that, yep. Like
Oh
that's
my gosh.
I,
That is so funny. That is so you. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
uh,
Oh, now I feel like I'm going to ask this question to everybody
yeah.
because okay, so okay, we don't have a ton of time
We
probably,
have like
but
one more minute.
okay, I just need to say that my husband is Chandler from Friends.
Oh my word. That
You
is so true.
right? Isn't he? Yes. Okay. Do you know what Scott is? Have you ever thought about that?
Um,
I was just gonna say I want to
gosh,
do this to everybody in my life. Like, what sitcom
I,
character are you?
oh, I mean, I actually think he would relate strongly with Ron Swanson on
Yes.
Parks and Rec. Some of the stuff Ron says, I'm like, that is you, Scott.
That is Ron Swanson. Yes. But absolutely not to the extreme. No,
no,
no, no, no. But
no, but like the part where like people are trying to talk to him and he's just like swiveling in a chair to get away from them, like, and they keep coming to him and asking questions. He's just like, I'm not
nope.
here. I'm not here. And then he's just
that's
like,
amazing.
and they're like, what are you doing? And he's just like staring at a wall. I think that is Scott's dream
That's really funny.
day
So
is just staring at a wall.
you're gonna have to ask him.
Okay,
this
I'm gonna
question.
ask him.
I need to know the answer.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, well, here we are at the end of this episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And again, if you enjoyed it, we would love it if you would share it with a friend, because that is the main way that people hear about other podcasts is when they have a friend tell them, hey, you should go listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
Holly and I do this all the time to each other.
Yep.
And so that's why we listen to so many true crime podcasts, because we keep telling each other about them. But we want you to tell your friend about this podcast, not the true crime stuff. No, just tell them to listen to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. Send them this episode, and we will talk to you next time. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving us a rating and review in your podcast app? This helps more women just like you find the podcast, and it also helps them to know whether the podcast would be a good fit for them. Just go to the show in your podcast app, then scroll down until you see the option for ratings and reviews. From there, you can tap to rate and write a review. It means the world to us when you take a couple minutes to do this, and thank you so much to everyone who has left a review. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.